Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Wonderful Wednesday. It's Captive Audience with your host, Don Anderson. Leslie Schneider is on week 2 of being on her vacation. So you all are going to have to put up with me doing another monologue. Fortunately, or unfortunately for you, being the grandson of a Southern Baptist preacher, I'm never at a loss for words. And I intend to deliver you a lots of them. So please feel free, as always, to provide your commentary on the side and I'll try to read those as I go along and respond to anything that you'd like. And with that, I thought I'd start this week with a little comedy. So I just posted on the chat line a copy of a news article that was done with about our favorite city, and that city would be Portland. So let's start with some comedy about Portland. Uh, the article is about Jefferson High School in Portland. Now, for those of you who don't or aren't familiar with Portland, Jefferson is a school that I guess they would call it once upon a time a historically black high school, although the population of Portland at its peak, that high school was probably 50% black back in the late 60s. And I know that neighborhood very well, having grown up there. Now there's a lot of lamentation, gnashing of teeth, and crying and whining because the population of the school has declined. The enrollment has declined so much. So this school's gone from roughly 3,000 students back in the late 60s to only 459 students right now. So in a logical world, in a world where rationale is being used, better yet, to say it, in a conservative world, what would you do with a school building that was 3 stories tall? The top 2 floors are empty because there's no students in it, and a school was designed for 3,000 students that now has 466 students. What would you do? Well, in a logical world, you would close that school down. But that's not what you do if you're in Oregon or if you're hardcore left or you're in Portland. What do they do there? They've raised $466 million modernization project. So they passed bonds in the neighborhood of $460 million in order to improve this facility in a school with only 459 students. Ladies and gentlemen, essentially what they've done is they're spending $1 million a student for a school building that basically sits empty. Where else in the world would do anything that insane other than Oregon? Well, of course, you do it in Washington and California as well, maybe Massachusetts, maybe upstate, maybe New York, but very few other places would do something that crazy. And just to add further emphasis, just how lunatic this is. So $1 million per kid. The fertility rate in that neighborhood in Portland, what must it be? Like I said, I know the neighborhood inside out, grew up in that neighborhood. You drive through that neighborhood, the neighborhood I grew up in now, and you won't see a single kid. I know for sure, because my mom still lives in that neighborhood. Within a 4-block radius of where she lives, there's not a single person under the age of 18. No one's having kids in that neighborhood. You need 2.1 per woman to replace the population. That area is filled with nothing but singles, nothing but yuppies who essentially will push out having children to the age of 30 or 40 if they have any children at all, and most of them don't. And you also have a huge gay population. Need I say more? They're not capable of having kids in spite of what they'd like to think. So you don't have any new kids coming online either. So it doesn't make any sense now or in the future to spend that kind of money on a school that doesn't even have any kids. And this is the thing that makes me laugh about this, which makes it even more killer, excuse the pun, they would do this, is that the Planned Parenthood clinic that the left loves to support is located within 3 miles of the school. So this has got to be the only business in the world that seeks to kill its future customers. So is there any surprise that you don't have any customers? The ones that are going to be coming online to go to your high school in 14 years, well, we kill off as many of them as possible. And then we're shocked that we don't have any kids in the school. So what is their solution to this? Well, in Salem, we talked about this last week. Their solution was go knock on doors, door to door, see if we can't find kids who aren't going to their terribly performing schools and force them to go to those schools. What's the solution in the Portland area? Well, we'll just try to go get parents, force them to send their kids who live in other school districts to bus them into this school district so they can have the numbers. I mean, where else, on what other planet would you do something this insane, but in liberal land? You can't make this up. And of course, there's always that word force, like mandate, another one of those words that the freedom loving, quote unquote, liberals love to use. So thought you'd find that humorous. Always a great place to start. Just waste the money. And yeah, Lori, just like Lori says, it's like the Federal Reserve building. If it's somebody else's money, let's spend it. Let's build the Taj Mahal. Whether there's clients for it or customers for it, doesn't really matter. It's your money, not my money. I'll just spend it till the cows comes home. So there is another Portland story. Thought you'd enjoy that humor. On a few other big news items, and this will be my monologue, I guess you would call it. So, the destruction of the body politic by the left, the continuous name calling of opponents, inability to debate policies on the merits, can't win an argument. They immediately go to name calling, homophobe, racist, sexist, misogynist, fascist, Hitler, Nazi. They keep using these terms over and over and over again. And the reason, of course, is if you can paint your enemy as evil, you never have to debate them on the merits. Of course, they can't win an argument on the merits. So you have to resort to name calling. At the end of the day, if that doesn't work, a certain percentage of that population is going to become violent. Because if I'm a Nazi, if I'm Hitler, if I'm fascist, then you're justified in killing me. And that's precisely what we're seeing. And you see this violence all over the place, and all of it's coming from the left. We had the school, you can hardly keep track of it anymore. We had the school shooting in Minneapolis a few weeks ago, immediately followed by the Ukrainian girl being stabbed in New York City subway simply for being white. And we know that's true because that's exactly what the guy was saying as he stabbed her from behind. We had the woman being beaten by a black mob, essentially saying the beat whitey. That occurred. And in the wake of the Charlie Kirk thing, you start forgetting about all of that. And then I think I heard today driving home that there was a shooting of ICE agents were shooting at an ICE building in Dallas. This is and always has been the Marxist strategy. If you go back, you think about the Russian Revolution, for those of you who've had this history, they tried to destroy the Tsar in head-to-head confrontation in the street. Lenin and Stalin tried to do it that way. And they tried that with the revolution in 1905. A lot of you maybe have forgotten that, but the first Russian Revolution occurred in 1905, when in Red Square, there was a peaceful parade that went sideways, and there was a massacre. And they tried to go violent. That didn't work. The institutions were just too strong for them to win. So what did the Stalinists learn from that? They learned that you have to infiltrate the key institutions. Once you can't beat them when you're on the outside of them, what you have to do is infiltrate them. Then once you have control of them, you can use them to take everything down. So in the case of Russia, the Duma, which is the equivalent of their Congress, their military, their educational system, their press, Stalin basically said out loud, once I control the telegraphs and railroads, I control those are technology, communication modes, and transportation modes of that era, telegraphs and railroads. Once you do that, you take advantage of any economic destabilization that exists or that you can create, and then you control the institutions. You can use that power to dominate. Does any of this sound familiar, by the way? For some of you who are old enough, you might remember the Weatherman Underground from back in the 60s. What was their strategy back in the 60s? It was to attack the institutions to make the country great. Key figures included Bill Ayers and Terry Robbins. These were the folks that Obama learned from, by the way. These are the key figures in his training. They conducted over 25 bombings between 1969 and 1975, including the U.S. Capitol, the Pentagon. They did a great prison escape for the LSD guru, Timothy Leary. They were behind all of those things. But none of that worked because the key institutions were still led by people who were rational, and they just crushed them. So what did they learn from that? They adopted a new strategy. And the new strategy over the last 50 years was to infiltrate and take over those institutions. And once you have control of them, then you can hit the rest of us back. And that is precisely what has happened. Does anybody doubt their level of success at doing this over the last 50 years? Step back and think for a minute. Overnight, it seems, they suddenly own all the major news networks, big tech, big pharma, the educational system, the medical system, the entire Democrat Party, and a good portion of the Republican Party. They own all of that. And what do they do when they get power? They go absolutely nuts. You look at the blue cities, look at the destruction of the blue cities, look at the destruction of the blue states. The crime is absolutely unbelievable in these places. Because that's what happens when they get control. They want the destruction because if they get the destruction, they can create chaos. And that's what you get when you get one party rule. And you look at these states that have one party rule, they've all just deteriorated and they're all suffering from mass out migration as people leave those states to go to the other states. So Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, all of these stuff, New York, Illinois, they're all suffering out migration because nobody wants to live in those circumstances. They may not know why it's bad, but they know that it's bad and they leave. Some of the other things that you see as a result of this, surveys are showing now that over 15% of the population supports murdering those that they have a disagreement with. That's another one of those things you have to ask yourself. How in the world did we get to that situation where we have people who are no longer pro free speech? If you don't speak the way that they want you to speak, that larger percentage of the population thinks it's okay to kill you. Do you want to live next door to people like that? That's what they're looking to create, is to create the grounds for civil war. That's what Marxists want. And the way that they've gotten here is by the way that they've infiltrated the educational system, and they essentially now raise our kids. Like it or not, if your kid is someplace 6 hours a day for the first 18 years of your life, guess who's doing the training and teaching? These Marxists are doing that. And you look at the university system, the public school system, social media, they support Antifa, Black Lives Matter. They teach white kids to hate themselves, black kids to hate white kids. That's what they've done, and they've been highly successful at doing it. This is Marxism is a religion, and it's a religion of revolution. This is no longer the case like in the old days when we thought that, hey, if the left was on one side of the aisle, the right's on the other side of the aisle, we both have different strategies to achieve the same result, which is the betterment of the country. That's no longer the case. These are revolutionaries who are determined to tear everything down. They have no interest in improving anything. They have declared war on the rest of us. And I think gradually the countries are coming to realize that this is the case. It's almost like in World War II. When Yamamoto basically said, what was that famous saying he had? When they bombed Pearl Harbor, I fear all we've done is awakened the terrible dragon and filled it with resolve. I think that's what's going to happen here as a result of what they did to Charlie Kirk, and essentially did to all the rest of us. That was our Pearl Harbor, and I think the country's finally going to wake up. We're slow to wake up, but I think we're finally waking up. And let me, with that, take a breather here and see if what commentary we have. Yeah, so let me know what you think. Otherwise, I'll roll along. The Jimmy Kimmel show cancellation, that's another interesting thing that's just occurred. I guess he's back in now from what I hear, but a lot of the syndicated outfits are not bringing him back. There was a mob in London, I understand, that stood outside chanting Charlie's in a box on Wednesday. Now you got to ask yourself, what kind of a human being would do something like that? Would cheer the death of a young man, a young husband, a young father? It's unbelievable. We have that percentage of population not only crazy enough to think that way, but crazy enough to say it out loud. And the question I always ask everyone is, hey, is that the kind of person you want to live next door to? The only reason society is able to function at all, you can't have freedom unless you have people who are civilized. And you don't get civil behavior unless you have civil people. These people are uncivilized and unhinged. And if you have too many of them, a free democracy can't function. I think it's kind of analogous to, you think about the ratio of police in any given city. Basically, I think I read this somewhere. There's roughly 17 ratio of one person for every 17. There's one police officer for every 17,000 people in any given, say, mid-sized American city. What that tells you is that the vast majority of the population behaves because it's the right thing to do. They're going to behave when no one's looking. If that ratio gets much above that, then it's going to be pretty impossible to have a free society. And when you have 50% of the population thinking it's okay to shoot somebody because they disagree with you, now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the majority of them would actually do it, but you don't need very many to do it before society comes apart. You don't need so with the average grocery store, for example, I think the pilferage rate is like 3%. If it gets much over 6%, then those stores will fail because the profit margins are too thin. If you have more than, say, 5-6% of the people that walk into a store stealing, those stores will fail and go away. Even think about the population as a whole in the same kind of, you could use the same kind of data around that. If you have, if it takes one police officer to manage 15,000 people in a city, then that city can function. But if it starts taking 5, 10, 15 people to manage that, you're going to have a problem. And when we have people think like this, too many of them, we're going to start to have a problem. So one more just food for thought I'd like to give you. One of the things my mom used to say when the KKK would demonstrate back in the 60s and 70s, quote unquote, let them show their rear ends, which basically means let them show themselves. Don't be violent. Let us show the rest of us who they are. And when the rest of us see who they are, they'll essentially destroy themselves. And I think that's precisely what is happening. You take a look at the results that happened with Turning Point USA in the wake of the assassination of their leader, Charlie Kirk. There's been over 54,000 requests for new campus chapters since then. And that, I think I took that report down about a week ago. It's probably a lot higher than that. So I'll steal the words from being a Star Wars fan when I was a kid, the words from Obi-Wan Kenobi, what he told Darth Vader: if you strike me down now, I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine, which is precisely what happened in that story. And then you think about the assassination of Jesus Christ himself. Once they assassinated him, what happened to Christianity? It blew up and became the largest religion in the world after that. And so you can't kill truth. You can't shoot it with a bullet. You can't hang it by the neck. You can't behead it. You can't burn it at the stake. All of those things have been tried. No doubt they'll continue to be tried in the future. But every time they do that, they'll cause it to expand and grow even more, because that is the nature of truth. So, crime. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about crime. It seems like it gave very short shrift to that stabbing in Charlotte. That was one of those events that was so horrific. And until the Charlie Kirk thing came along, I never even looked. I still haven't looked at the video of either one of those events, by the way, because those two things are just too horrific for me to imagine. And what's so horrific is not so much the fact that it was done, but that another human being could be so low as to do something like that. There's something even more horrific to me, by the way. There's something more personal about stabbing somebody. To shoot somebody from 200 yards away or even 15 feet away is one thing, but to plunge a knife in the neck of someone over and over again, particularly a young girl that can't weigh more than 120 pounds soaking wet, is just something that's utterly mind-blowing to me and totally bereft of humanity. But that's what this person did. And you have to ask yourself, what leads to the creation of a human being who would do such a thing? And I think it's, again, one of those things that the radical left has done on purpose. You create a society where you wreck the vehicle that civilizes human beings. So we destroy the family. We get the father out of the house. We put the mom on a welfare check. She thinks the welfare is dad. And then you roll with that for a few generations, with men coming in and out of the house, coming and going. We can all use your imagination to know what happens when you have that. And voila, 2 or 3 generations, you're going to have crazed, crazed women who basically just can't function in society. And you're going to have men who are just, the only place they can be taken care of is in prison. That's what we have, and they've successfully done that. Couple of other things. I'm just kind of trolling along here. Let's see. I'd be totally remiss if I didn't speak for a minute about the United Nations. Let me see if I can get this cursor to highlight this for me. Bear with me. And this was the trip to the United Nations. Bear with me here. So I'm sure you've all followed that. I'm not going to give you a number of these things that you've heard already, like the elevator malfunction, the teleprompter malfunction. Those things are so childish. It's like something that a high school kid or even a middle school kid would think of. I mean, there's no question in my mind that that was done on purpose. But I think one of the things that no one commented on that I saw, but did you notice that both Melania and President Trump walked to the top of the elevator while it was stuck? That was a lot of stairs to go up. And to have a guy who, if he's not 80 years old, he's close to it, go up those stairs and hardly look out of breath is truly amazing. And you compare that to what we had just a couple of years ago. Would Biden have even be able to get up those stairs, even 5 of those stairs without falling down? I completely doubt it. But let's set that aside. I love the fact that Trump is calling out Europe. I think a couple of things that he said there were absolutely brilliant. One of them was that Europe, he's been working tirelessly to end the violence between Ukraine and Russia, and the Europeans continue to buy Russian oil. So they're essentially funding the war against themselves. It's just great that he's calling them out. He's not afraid to do it in front of the entire world. I think that is absolutely the thing to do. If they want this war to end, they should participate in ending the war. And it's just great that we finally have a president who's calling them out. The other thing that I think that I was very happy that he called out was that Europe is essentially killing itself. It's not its own citizens. You see increasingly huge movements in France, Germany, Italy, Great Britain, to bring freedom back to those countries, to end this crazy policies on energy and these crazy policies on immigration. And the leadership class refuses to implement what the regular population wants to see. And as a result of these policies, they're absolutely destroying these countries. They tried to do that here. Fortunately, we had a change in leadership here, and we were able to put a stop to it. Here's another factoid that came out of that. The UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants coming into the United States. So think about that for a minute. The United Nations is that we pay 25% of the operating cost of the UN, by the way. They're sending 624,000 migrants into the United States, and they're using our money to help pay for immigrants to come into the United States and destroy this country. You can't make it up. You really can't. You almost wonder if we should just walk away from the United Nations. Let them go back to the League of Nations like they had back in the 30s. What good is it? How many wars has it stopped? I think Trump actually asked them that. How many wars have he stopped? He stopped 7 wars by himself in the last year. They've stopped nothing. Why are we even paying for them? Then I thought this was another one. This is from a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't talked about it because, again, so many other events occurred that kind of took this out of the water. I'm just going to send you a quick link to take a look at this. And this is this HB1 visa thing. Now, this is one of these things a lot of people aren't aware of. I spend a lot of time working with these folks because I used to recruit them. But the HB1 visas are like cheat codes for America's tech and innovation sectors. Basically, what they're doing is the whole rationale for having these HB1 visas was to bring employees into the United States that had special skills that we didn't have here in the country. So that's how it started. So what happened, though, was these tech companies got really greedy with that. And they started expanding that, taking people from outside the country, where we have plenty of people in the United States who have those skill sets, but they could pay them next to nothing, bring them into the United States, and then basically work them like slaves, like Hebrew slaves, to be blunt. And that's precisely what's happening. And what that's done is, so you have kids that go to school in the United States here, get all the degrees, spend a fortune on the education, and then they're unable to get a job in their field. And the reason is because 71% of these people in these fields are coming from India. I think another 12% are coming from China. So it's just not economically sensible for these companies to hire them when they can go get them from India or China, pay them with this HB1 visa, like probably 50% or less than what they pay an American. And then the American kids are stuck with $100,000 in debt and then working at the baristas Starbucks. That's basically what's happening. And it's just great to see that President Trump has come along and he's putting a stop to that. And think about what this is going to do for the youth vote, by the way. So Trump signed an executive order that basically jacked up the application fee for new HB1Bs from $1,000 per person to $100,000 per person. That ought to put a stop to it. And that, by the way, according to the Commerce Secretary, is intended to be an annual fee. So every year you want to bring that person over from another country on an HB1, you got to pay $100,000 in fees every single year. The great thing about that is it's going to, no question about it, result in these companies being forced to hire Americans. And this is like one of the greatest things ever. And this is one of those things that really, and this is one of those reasons why the youth vote is going more and more towards Republicans. And I think we're going to see a massive swing. We're already seeing a massive swing. But this next election is going to, these midterms, I think, are going to be historic in that regard. Not to mention the elections of, is it 2028? I lose track of these things now. So that's going to be a great thing. That is absolutely huge. He's also unleashed this gold card, the fast track visas. He's charging people over $1 million if they want to come here and be a U.S. citizen, and they can show that they've got over $1 million and they're going to bring businesses here. They're going to hire Americans. That is absolutely brilliant. You know, pay to play is nothing better than that. Let's see. What else did I miss here? Chicago, always something in Chicago. The mayor signs an order to block possible troop deployment. That's in Epic Times. I'm not sure what the constitutional authority is for him to do that. I just happened to see that article, and that was the first thing. I didn't even read the article. I just saw the headline, but I'll post the article there. So I don't think mayors have any say-so whatsoever in terms of federal troops being able to come to the United States. The governor, he has the right to ask for it, but the president, if he sees that they're unable to control it, may very well send the troops in over the governor's head. Now, obviously, there's a huge political price associated with doing that. I really like the strategy of looking at blue cities that are in red states. So those red states are going to have governors that'll be supportive of it, and the mayors have nothing to do or say about it. And the president brings those troops into those cities. So I think that's a fantastic strategy. I know that's a strategy that they're putting in place with regard to Memphis. I like to see that roll out, and then people are able to see for themselves. Look at how peaceful, look at how quiet, look at how beautiful Washington, D.C. is. Oh my goodness, in a few more months, they'll go to Memphis. Look at Memphis. Crime has dropped to nothing. Look how clean and nice it is. Beautiful people can like walk the streets of Memphis again at night. It just goes city by city by city. So by the time it comes for election, you're going to have this. It's better than data. It's going to be objective fact. Look at these places that were once horrendous, that once a Republican solution was put into place, are now great. You will get those votes. People, you won't need to present data. It's not theoretical. This is objective reality, just like the border. They told us for years that the border was unfixable. Man gets in office, and 3 or 4 months later, we got no immigration problem. So that, I think, is the solution, to that. So sports fans, that's pretty much all I had for the evening. I'm going to cut it relatively short here because it's time for ice cream with the grandchildren. But thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you found this informative. I always find it fun. It's always fun doing research for these things. And keep the faith. Let freedom ring. We are winning, but we have not won. We have a long ways to go before we win. It took them 30 or 40 years to get us to this position. It's going to take us at least a couple of generations to fix it. Probably long after the folks listening to us, myself and the rest of you, are gone. But it's imperative that we do our part so the next generation can get what we got, a better place to live than what we had before us. Thanks a bunch to you all. Take care. Have a good night.